Welcome to Spilling the Tea on Non-Monogamy with me, Gaz Darkwood. Spilling the Tea is a podcast dedicated to speaking with different people who practice non-monogamy in all of its forms to pull together as many different perspectives and experiences as possible, all into one place. On each episode, I'll be joined by a different guest to talk about their own non-monogamy experiences. I'm always looking for more guests, as without you there would be no podcast, so if you would like to be a guest, please send an email to spillingtheteapodcast@outlook.com. On this episode, I'm joined by Kerrie.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Very happy to have you there.
I'm happy to be here. It's exciting.
That's good. That's definitely a good start. So first things first, do you mind telling me how old you are and how long you've been practicing non-monogamy?
So I'm 37. We've been non-monogamous for about 5 years and poly specifically for about a year and a half.
Okay, so what is your current situation? If like in terms of partners, you say you're now poly. You didn't necessarily start as poly, but now you are. So do you have multiple partners at the moment?
At the risk of using lots of terminology, we are a open triad. So I have a male partner and a female partner who are also partners. And one of my partners has another partner outside of that.
So it's kind of becoming on more of a polycule situation.
Yes, we're slowly adding extra limbs that come with all their own benefits.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. So what made you start the journey into, let's say, so I am interested in how you branched from non-monogamy to specifically polyamory, but how exactly did you start non-monogamy in the first place? Were one of these relationships pre-existing, or did this all both of these relationships come after the fact?
So me and my male partner, Darren, we've been together for 16, 17 years now. Then about 5 years ago, we pretty much wanted to fill a few fantasies that needed extra bodies. So kind of branched into kind of E&M swinging type scene. Although when we first came into it, we were very clear that we would rather kind of a friend with benefits rather than necessarily purely swinging.
Yeah.
And we kind of we did that for a little while, and then we met our partner M, and originally that was supposed to still be a casual friends with benefit type thing. And then that evolved. It became clear that we all had deeper feelings for each other, so we took the jump and made it something a bit more official.
You've been, I guess, all three of you have been happy with that ever since.
Yeah. It's not somewhere that I ever saw ourselves ending up, but now we're here. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because when, especially when people open up pre-existing relationships, I think there can be a lot of uncertainty and, jealousy and insecurity, and no one ever thinks that far ahead. And I think that can be quite a common thing, especially when things end up leading into polyamory, that looking back going, oh fuck, how did we end up here? This is not something I ever expected, but fucking hell, I'm glad that we've got it now.
Yeah. And, I'm not going to say it's always been smooth sailing. There's been speed bumps and a lot of work from, I say all of us, more so I think me and Darren as a couple to kind of open that up. But I think for us, because when we came into kind of ethical non-monogamy, we were quite clear that whilst we were looking to fulfill some of our fantasies, we didn't want that to be a one-sided thing. We really wanted to find someone who maybe shared our fantasies, but had, kind of things of their own that they wanted to experience as well. So we sort of, it was kind of E&M with that poly vibe anyway, even though it was very much casual and purely physical.
Yeah, and I think that's a way that a lot of people, when especially when opening relationships, or what seems to be the most common thing, is that people do it mainly for sex or for physical activities. And then a lot of people have rules of like, yeah, you can have sex with someone, but you're not allowed to catch feelings, in air quotes, which is a term I fucking hate. But that seems to be quite a common thing. Like, people don't expect that. But I think I'm more along your side that, yeah, like if I'm going to do something with someone else, I also want it to be something they want to do as well. I don't want to use someone to like fill a hole for my needs. Like, okay, but what are their needs? What are they trying to get out of this as well? And are we compatible? I don't want someone to be just a toy for me to use. I want,
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, because we have kids, I've got a chronic health condition. Life can be really chaotic. So we really wanted to find people when we first started looking that we were happy to hang out with, as well as kind of the sex aspect, because life happens, and we wanted to be able to take advantage of the time we had, but also not feel like we always had to grasp every moment for sex that we could, almost. That it would be okay if we'd arranged a meet up and then we're like, actually not really in the mood, can we watch a movie instead? And that would still work.
Yeah, that's like, I'm completely on the same page with as like with you. I think that is a thing that not everyone that possesses, and I think that is a thing where I think it's hard to, like, some people claim then to be monogamous, some people call themselves polyamorous, and I think a lot of labels kind of get thrown around and people don't necessarily know what they all mean. But I personally feel in myself that I'm polyamorous, and that's the label I use for myself. And I think like part of that comes from wanting that sort of thing. Like, if I'm going to have, say, casual fun with someone, I don't want it to be sex focused. And like you said, the exact same thing that I always say, like, how about one evening that actually we're not in the mood, so we just hang out and watch a film together? That's like fucking perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when you said about like when people are kind of, oh, you can't catch feelings, it's funny because when I look back, none of our rules and boundaries that we set when we thought it was going to just be a sex thing was none of our rules were around anything like that. It was more, it just kind of hadn't occurred to us that might be something, a route that we would go down. A lot of our rules were more around kind of practical things, safe sex, obviously because we've got kids, a certain degree of protection around them, checking in if we were meeting up with someone, and kind of more practical type rules, which I think also made it a lot easier when we did kind of say, okay, we're gonna put a label on this as such. This is gonna be a relationship, and we're all going to really invest in this. I think that it took some of that big leap away because it was very organic.
Yeah, I think that's and that it being organic, I think, makes a big difference. It's and therefore it doesn't feel like it's something that you're actively doing or actively trying to do. It just feels like it's something which is coming naturally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've tried to explain to people before about, and I think everyone's different. Everyone has different experiences. And like I say, there are different labels. Like, I generally think of myself as polyamorous. People will use different labels and people use them for different meanings. But I think that is the key thing to me, is that, like, I'm not doing a thing. I'm not picked this label and going, oh, I want to do that. The way that I do things is just the way that feels most natural to me. It doesn't feel strange. It doesn't feel strange to have multiple relationships. It doesn't feel strange to have other casual partners or situations, or even if they're just one-offs or whatever they are. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm doing this thing. It just feels like I'm just being myself, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I mean, even when I look back at us, like when I say considered myself monogamous, it was something that I never really thought about. We me and Darren met and we entered into a relationship, and we carried on together. And yes, I'd stopped dating and things like that, but that was just because, like, that's what you do when you meet someone. I've never kind of gone into this idea that you can only fall in love with one person. I mean, you've only got to look at the amount of people who get married, get divorced, and get remarried again. And I never really if you'd have asked me, and I'd have really thought about it, I would have said, like, I don't see any reason why you can't love two people at once. But it's usually society that says you can't have both, so you pick.
Yeah.
And once I discovered that there were quite a lot of people who don't pick, it was just kind of like, all right, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I almost expected more of this big revelation to myself that, oh, this is what you are. But it was kind of more looking at monogamy and go, okay, that's what you're not. And there's a certain amount of situationship to it. I think if I didn't have the partners I did, I could quite easily be what people would view as monogamous. But within myself, that option to have more partners, more connections would have always been there.
Yep. Yeah. So one thing that I think is worth mentioning, I think I said before that we're on a very similar page, but I think we're actually in very similar situations as well. We're a similar age. But so I've been with my wife for 19 years. And we started exploring non-monogamy 5 years ago. So a timeline's not too dissimilar to yours. And we also have 2 children. So I think in a way we are in a very similar situation. But one of those things that, like you said about having the capacity for love for more than one person at a time, and I think I could do a whole episode of this podcast on breaking down love and what love means in all its different ways. Because one thing I don't actually like the word love the way it's used, because I think it can mean so many different things in so many different contexts. But one thing that I found when I first started exploring non-monogamy and thinking about it was like looking at my kids. Like when I had the second kid, I didn't stop loving the first one. I didn't love the first one any less. It's not like I had 100% love for children, and when the second one came along, that got split 50-50. I had 100% for each of them. So clearly there is a capacity for that, and actually we're just kind of trained, or the way that the phrasing that I tend to use is programmed from birth into monogamy being the standard, so that we all think, hang on, how can you have more than one partner? How can you love more than one person at a time? Because that's not how things are done. But actually they are done like that all the time. People have multiple children, people have multiple friends, people have multiple hobbies. Like I can say I love hobby A, I also love hobby B. One doesn't take away from the other. They're completely different, but I still love them both the same. But for some reason, when it comes to sex and romantic relationships, we're programmed to think, no, only one. You only get one. Yeah.
And the children example is one that I often give to people who say, oh, I don't think you could be in love with more than one person. And usually saying like, so which one of your kids don't you love then? Is a real eye-opening to people. And there's often the argument that they'll say, oh, that's different. That's not romantic love. But most of us, even if we are monogamous, even if we're married or, long-term partnerships, have had more than one romantic love in our life.
Yeah.
Some of them are more intense than others. Some of them last longer than others, but there's generally more than one for most people.
Yeah. And another thing that I think of, following on from that, is that people, if I said to someone, I'm polyamorous, I have multiple partners. If I said this to a monogamous person, they go, what? That's fucking crazy. How does that work? What's going on? Whereas if I said, oh, I'm cheating on my wife with another person, they might not like it, but they understand. I'm like, well, why is that type of monogamy normalized? Why is that okay in people's brains when it's shady and it's unethical? But when it's ethical monogamy, people can't get their head around it, and they see it as that you're doing something wrong. And to me, that's completely backwards.
Especially because the bit they frown on is the behind your partner's back part.
Yeah.
So those of us who identify as polyamorous or E&M or whatever are like, well, we took away the behind the back part.
Exactly. Yeah. So everyone knows about everything. Yeah, it's a very strange thing, but this is again one of those things that I think about with like monogamous programming. We're all brought up with, the whole nuclear family concept. But that's even more prevalent in all the films, the TV we watch, the media we consume, the books we read, and everything. Like there's always, generally, and it's a little bit less heteronormative these days, but it would generally always be a husband and a wife, and that's it. And we're
Yeah.
all brought up to believe that's the normal family structure. Now, also in all these forms of media, what is very common and very normalized is one of the people in that relationship is having an affair or is cheating. It may not be glorified within the context of the story. The writer may not be saying like, oh, they're having an affair. This is a good thing. Everyone's happy. Maybe the character is shamed for it. It's so normalized by the fact that you see cheating everywhere you look in media, so that everyone just thinks that's normal, even though we may not be okay with it. It's normal. Whereas when you say that you're ENM or you're polyamorous, people go, whoa, what the fuck is this? Because it's not normalized to them. They don't know about it.
And like even further than that, in some ways, I've got friends who have split up, but stayed really good friends and co-parented incredibly well. And people will say, and I mean, they're both remarried, and people will say to their partners, oh, do you trust them being around their ex like that? And that blows my mind, because surely you would be pleased that your partner is so well adjusted and so grown up that they can have a relationship with someone that they share something massive with. I mean, kids are huge.
Yeah.
And do that well in a way that benefits everyone. It's a different kind of love, romantic love, but it's still, I like to think of my partners having that capacity, not view it as something deeply suspicious.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of those things that I think, like, one of the things, maybe one of the biggest things that I've learned from polyamory is to, I don't know the best way to word this, but to take every relationship is as important as every other relationship, regardless of how, of where you would place that relationship on a scale. So like, I now take my friendships not a lot more seriously, but they're more meaningful. Whereas I think when I was younger and before I discovered non-monogamy, I would kind of just take it for granted. Like, well, of course I've got friends. That's what you do. You go out with friends, you hang out with people, you send messages to people. That's just what you do. And I don't take that for granted anymore. I'm like, no, I cherish friendships more. And if I get a message from someone, or if I'm talking to someone, if I'm hanging out with someone, like, that's important to me. And I kind of, this weird thing that people say with, like, when they're going out with someone, going out for a drink or something, like, oh, is it a date or is it not a date? And I always think, well, if it's something in my diary, then it's a date. That's what I'm doing. If I'm going out to meet someone that I've met off a dating app for a drink, that's a date. If I'm going out to meet a friend to catch up, because we haven't seen each other in a month, over a cup of coffee, I still see that as a date. Like, it's just as important. I'm still putting that time aside in my calendar for them. And during that time period, my focus is on them.
Yeah, you're spending that time with them with intentionality. And yeah, I think it's something that I found as well. Like, different relationships have different bits tied into it. So like, sometimes people will say something like, oh, but you put Darren first, right? Because you've like got the kids and things. And it's like, no, the kids come first. Certain aspects of our life come first. But my relationship with him doesn't necessarily come first, because sometimes my other partner needs me more in that moment. So in that moment, that relationship comes first. Yeah. So sometimes a family member needs me more. So that relationship comes first. It's not, there's not a ranking system as to which is indefinitely more important to me. It's who needs my time, my presence more in that moment that I prioritize almost. And I mean, sometimes it's also me that I'm prioritizing in that moment.
Yeah, and that's actually the last thing you said. That's something that I've said before on the podcast, and I think is a bit of advice I would give to other people as well. That is to make time for yourself. You need time for yourself as well. I think when people begin exploring non-monogamy and they're like, oh, brilliant, I can have a date with a different person every day of the week. Like, you can, but also it's important to have time for yourself, because you're going to burn out and you're going to not know what to do with yourself. Like, you need to look after yourself first and foremost. Only fit things in around what you can actually manage. Don't overdo it just because you can. That's like, I could eat a whole cake in one sitting. but that's not any good for anyone. Like, I could just have a piece of cake now and then maybe a piece tomorrow. And I think people can rush to say want to eat that whole cake, want to plan in as many things as they can, that they actually forget to take time for themselves.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people miss that more relationships comes with more responsibility. It's not less responsible. Like, it's not just in terms of your relationship with that person, but how your relationship with that person can impact on your other relationships. So, like, whilst Darren has 3 partners in total, and I have 2, I've said, like, I'm not actively dating, but I might be open to something if someone come along. I'm also aware that I wouldn't necessarily have the capacity in myself for another relationship of the intensity of the 2 that I have. And obviously that's fine. I just need to be aware of that if I meet someone, that they either need to be on the same wavelength, or that I look at what I can do to make that happen, rather than just being like, yeah, I've got 8 girlfriends and 7 boyfriends and they all just have to figure it out.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
at the end of the day,
I have a
you let
responsibility
them all
to
down.
my existing relationships to maintain them, as well as anything else I might explore.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a similar thing. Like, I kind of have a rule. Talking to someone new, like, I know how much spare time I've got and spare energy I've got, and it's not a lot. I do have some capacity there for new things, but it's not a very big capacity. So if I start talking to someone, I start like clicking and connecting with someone, I'm quite upfront with saying, look, just so you know, this is my situation. I have this going on. I have this going on. I have this going on. Yes, I do have some time. Yes, I can see something happening between us, but it's going to be, one evening every 5-6 weeks, because that's the only capacity. But if you're good with that, then fucking brilliant. Let's go for it. If you're not, that's fine too. But at least we've got that other way up front, because I don't want to lead anyone on and then end up letting people down in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, learning to be really kind of bluntly honest, I think has been not so much a challenge, but more something that I especially have had to remind myself as we've gone into this, that it is okay to just say, actually, that doesn't work for me because of XYZ. And it's not a bad thing to set your boundaries and expectations quite bluntly like that.
Yeah.
Especially the risk is going all feminist. Especially as a woman, you're used to kind of being softer, making it easier for everyone, like gently tiptoeing around people, and it doesn't work once you start adding more people into your life in a bigger way. Everyone has to know where you're at very clearly, so you need to be very clear with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that took me a while to actually learn well, was to, it's not that I didn't want to be honest, but one thing that I would always want to protect people's feelings, and like, I should tell this person or this partner this thing, but I know they're not going to be happy about it, and they will be okay. They know it's within our boundaries or whatever, but I know it may, even if it doesn't upset them, it may make them feel uncomfortable. And I want to spare them that discomfort. Therefore, I don't want to tell them this thing. And And in my mind, I was being the good guy. Or I was doing, like, I was saving them from discomfort. I was doing the right thing. But actually, that always ended up causing problems, because information that should be getting shared wasn't. It would come out in the long run. It would generally come out too late, and it would be a much bigger problem. So it was
it's
quite a
something
thing
that
to
I've
learn,
been
to be like,
guilty of.
yes. And I got get to a thing where I'm like, no, I have this thing to share. I need to share it now. I don't want to. I'm going to feel uncomfortable about it, but I'm just going to say, look, you need to know this. Here's this information. And 9 times out of 10, they go, oh, okay. I'm really glad you told me. Thank you. And I'm like, fucking hell. That was so easy. Like, my heart was pounding in my chest, because I thought, God, this isn't, this is going to cause a little bit of a, not a scene, a little bit of an issue. It's going to cause some discomfort, and we're going to have to talk about it. I'm like, oh my God, that was so fucking easy. That's so much better than holding on to these things. But still, every time, I always feel like there's something holding me back, something saying like, no, spare them, don't say this thing. And there's like a little bit of a barrier I have to break through every time to say, no, just share the information, get it out there.
Yes. And that kind of discomfort, I've always been quite happy to like sit with something that's uncomfortable, whether that be something someone's told me or something I've experienced, and kind of work through it, and then whatever happens from there depends on, obviously, on the situation, but kind of giving someone else that same discomfort. And I really struggle with that. Often my biggest problem as such is that I will give details but as sparingly as possible. Because I feel like I'm like saving you from whatever this thing is that might be uncomfortable, might be something that you have to work for or through or whatever, and then it kind of prolongs it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not work in progress. I'm absolutely not going to say we've got the hang of this completely, but it's something that I think I've got a little bit better with, but it's definitely something that I have to consciously stop myself doing. And it's different with each partner as well, which was something that kind of caught me by surprise. But when I look back at it, it's kind of like, well, obviously they're different people. They have different communication styles. But kind of having to learn how to communicate with another person effectively.
Yeah, and I can completely relate to what you're saying, that because I the same thing. I don't like to lie in general. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But I do this thing where, save from telling a lie, I will like not reveal the whole truth, which is what you said made me think is a similar thing. Like, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling all the important parts. I'm not lying about anything, but there may be small details that I think don't need to be shared, so I hold them back. And actually, there's a name for that, which is lying by omission. So you're not technically telling anything that's untrue, but you're specifically holding back a little bit of what is the actual truth, and that doesn't help anyone either. And like you said, it's a whole learning thing. Like, I know that I do these things, and I do try to not do it, but every time these situations arise, it still doesn't come naturally to me. I still have this, my brain is leaning towards want to do it this way, and I have to sort of course correct myself and go, no, you don't do that anymore. Come back into this lane. We do it this way now.
Yeah. And especially coming off the back of a really long-term relationship, like knowing someone so well and having done things kind of in a certain way for so long, to then introducing a whole new set of boundaries to some extent, but a whole new set of like a whole new board almost to play on is, I think people underestimate how difficult it can be in ways you don't expect. So little things like jealousy, for example. I'm not a particular jealous person. I get a lot of compassion from seeing people happy. I always have. But I know that it's something that some of my other partners struggle a little bit with. So if I have gone on a date, or I've had a play date, or, you know, I've met up with someone, I might come home and be like, oh yeah, it was all right. Yeah, we had fun. Whereas internally, I'm actually like, oh my God, it was amazing. We did, you know, it was so fun. We did this. And I don't want to say that, because I know that they will feel that little bit of jealousy. But I'm also aware that little bit of jealousy isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a very natural emotion. It's kind of what you do with it that makes the difference. And learning to trust them to deal with it well.
Yeah.
Has been, I think, one of the biggest learning curves for me. To kind of believe in the foundation that we've set, and just to say, like, although it might be uncomfortable, you might be jealous, that's fine. You're allowed to be jealous, and I don't need to fix that for you.
Yeah.
It took a while for me to get my head around.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think of it as kind of like one of the golden rules of, maybe not specifically non-monogamy, people do it different ways, but definitely with polyamory, is that you're not responsible for someone else's feelings. What you are responsible for is giving them all the information they need, so they know exactly what they are feeling and why they are feeling it. So if your partner's feeling jealousy, that's fine. That's not a problem. And if you But the important thing is you're not lying to them, you're not hiding from them. You've given them all the information you need to. If they feel jealous about it, there's nothing you can do about it. That's not down to you to manage their feelings. It's down to them to manage their own feelings. And hopefully, and this is one of the things I say, that when people start exploring polyamory specifically, is that you have to do the work on yourself. You have to look inwardly at yourself. And like, if I'm in that situation where I feel jealous, like, it's not anyone else's fault I feel jealous. It doesn't matter what my partner's done. I'm not going to take it out on them. I need to look at myself. Okay, why am I feeling this way? What is it? It's all within myself where those feelings come from. So I have to look inwardly to deal with.
Yeah. And that kind of not giving that back to your partner, not kind of saying, well, I'm jealous and it's your fault. Recognizing that what you can bring back to your partner is, actually, I'm feeling a bit jealous because I don't feel like we've had much time together recently. Can we set aside a date or a time, or that we can have some time together? Is a very different scenario to, well, I'm jealous that you've gone out with someone else again.
Yeah, and I think that's the opposite end of the spectrum.
One closes the conversation breakdown. One opens it up and allows everyone to get their needs met. And sometimes it is just, well, I'm jealous because they went out and did something fun and I didn't. And that's okay. Like, that sucks, but that's also life. Because I also get that kind of jealousy when my kids win the cool toy out of the grab machine and I don't.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, you're not going to have a go at the kid for it. It's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. They were playing the machine the same as you. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with jealousy, like you said, that I think there's two ends of the spectrum of how you can react to it. You could say to your partner, I feel jealous about the fact that you had a date with someone else, or whatever it may be. I didn't like it. I don't want you to do it anymore because it made me feel bad. So that's the extreme negative end of the spectrum. And then the extreme positive would be, you went out and had a date with your partner. I feel jealous about it. It's fine. I know it's nothing to do with you. There's nothing you can do about it. I don't want you to necessarily change anything. I just want you to understand how I feel, because I may feel a little bit moody or a little bit off, and that's the reason why. It will pass. I know you did nothing wrong. You played within our boundaries. Everything is fine. It's just made me feel a little bit odd, and I just want you to be aware that I'm feeling that way. So, because also it's hard for your partner if you're feeling jealous and uncomfortable, and maybe you start pulling away and becoming a bit distant, and they don't know why. They're like, what's going on here? So just by communicating that with them, maybe you need a little bit of space to work things out, but just letting them know changes everything.
Yes. And I think it's uncomfortable because we're trained to not name our emotions like that from a really young age. It's, the boys don't cry kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult thing to reprogram. But I also feel like it's improved my parenting as well, because I'm kind of more open to, like, if the kids are whining at me, to say to them, look, do you actually need something from me, or are you just out of sorts?
Yeah.
Because if you need something, let's talk about it and work out what that is and whether or not I can give that to you. Because with the best will in the world, you know what kids are like. I can't change the moon to green. Sorry.
Yeah.
But so, sometimes they just want to have a moan, because sometimes life's a little bit rubbish and you want to have a whinge and feel down and grumpy, and you wake up the next morning and it's fine.
Yeah, and everyone's got different size batteries. Sometimes they just run out, and it's got nothing to, and it may have nothing to do with anything. It may have been that your battery was running almost on empty anyway, and then you were on 1% battery left, and then your partner going on a date on an evening where actually you could have kind of done with having them around just for a little bit of comfort, that pushed it to 0. And that's no one's fault. They already had this plan. They had this date planned for weeks. They didn't know what your battery was like. That's nothing. That's no one's fault. It's just one of those things that the universe has lined things up in such a way that's happened and left you in a situation where you're not completely happy. It's just got to be about how you understand that yourself and why you're in that situation and how you manage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one of the things you said about it making you say you're changing your parenting style as well, I think is quite interesting. There's one thing I think quite often about, I don't know if I want to say monogamy as a broader term or polyamory specifically, but I think not. I think that more. I don't know the best way of wording this. I think I've said this before, but more people, everyone, monogamous couples, whatever, everyone should learn a lot of the fundamentals of polyamory, because not necessarily about doing things with other people, having your partners doing things with other people, but mainly about the communication you have between you and your partner, but because that then extends to things like between you and your friends, you and your co-workers, or you and your children, like you mentioned. And all of that comes from the things you've learned from polyamory. And that actually, you realize that those branches spread across your whole life. Effectively, everyone you come into contact with, I think maybe you communicate with slightly differently just because of these things you've learned that are all rooted in polyamory. Those things extend everywhere. And like, I constantly see online people, people posting things online about like, oh, my partner did X, Y, and Z. Am I in the right to be pissed off of them? What should I do? What do I do in this situation? What would you do? And like, what would I do? I'd fucking talk to them. Why are you posting about it online? It shouldn't be that difficult. The first port of call should be to talk to them about the situation. And it blows my mind how little people actually communicate with their partners, and especially, living in the lifestyle we're in, where communication is key. That's the main thing. It's the first thing everyone learns, I think, exploring polyamory. So many people just don't have that skill, and I think this is something that everyone will greatly benefit from, is learning these sorts of things.
Absolutely, because it helps you be clearer as well with working at yourself what you need when you learn to stop and analyze something. And often I find like we bicker less because I don't hold on so much to the little annoying things. I actually just say them. Like, instead of being huffy that he didn't empty the bin again, I'll just be like, you said you'd empty the bin. Can you do that, please? Like, and once it's said, I mean, we're not perfect. It still happens, but, I find that kind of thing happens quite a bit less. And with again, with the children, with friends, especially someone with a chronic health condition, like, getting better at setting my own boundaries has been really useful for me. Recognizing that I can say no to things, even if someone else isn't going to like that, even if, it makes someone else's life possibly a bit harder. But if that's what I need, that's what I need.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's something I'm quite pleased to be able to pass on to the children, especially. They're both neurodivergent, and encouraging them to really advocate for themselves within their own boundaries is quite a nice thing for them to be able to see us practice as well. So they're both aware that we are polyamorous. They've met the various partners, the other two partners kind of out with of our home life. And I mean, I think their lives are very much enriched by my other partner, by my metamors, and to see how different people communicate and how sometimes you compromise, sometimes you hold fast, and seeing how that works in practice has been really good for them. And also, strangely, like when we talked earlier about like monogamy being the thing that you do, we've always been a very much love is love kind of family. Like from when they were very young, they've always understood that you love who you love, and we don't judge that or have a problem with that. So when we told them that we were polyamorous and like we had another girlfriend, they were both so relaxed about it, and we're just kind of like, all right, okay. And I hadn't expected them to be quite so nonplussed.
I wouldn't expect it either, to be honest. But I'm sure that was a very positive situation to be in at the time.
Yeah, it's like my youngest was just like, are we going to have two houses? Because I really don't want to have to move my stuff backwards and forwards. Can it just stay in one house? So we were like,
asking the important questions, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, no, we're going to stay in our house just sometimes, and we'll come and stay at ours too. And my eldest was just like, she'd been rummaging the fridge, and she just turned around and went, "What's the date on this cheese? Because I want to eat it." And I was like, well, if that doesn't sum up how unfussed you are by what we thought was this great revelation, and we'd dithered over how to tell them, and they're just like, all right, okay.
Yeah, it's surprising, isn't it? I think to be fair, I think to an extent, everyone builds up in their head that revealing information like that is going to be worse than it is. Like, I've heard from multiple friends and things that came out as either homosexual, bisexual, or transgender to their parents and friends and family, and they built it up, and they waited on it, and they sat on it for ages, sometimes months, years, because they were so scared of the outcome. And then when they actually said it, their family were like, "Oh, okay, all right. So what's on TV next? What's for dinner?" Or, like you say, those things like, "Can I eat this cheese because it's out of date?" I think a lot of people build it up, and I think we're all guilty of it. I think this is just a human trait that we worry about almost worst case scenario, or we're generally pessimistic. I think things, and most of the time, actually, it's nowhere near as bad as we ever expected it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Norfolk. I often joke it's 20 years back in the past. But just, small town, it wasn't a hugely progressive place in general when I was younger. And so whilst I've always known I was bisexual, I never really came out because there wasn't really anyone else who was bi. And I think it was also back, we're talking 25 years ago. Gosh, that makes me feel really old. Back then, being to be gay in any way was still kind of, oh, if you must, but kind of over there, away from me kind of thing. So because I never had a female partner, I just never mentioned it to anyone. So actually, when when I was telling my family that we were polyamorous and we had a girlfriend, and this is what we were doing, my mom actually said to me afterwards, she was like, "So are you like bi then?"
Did you not know that?
I kind of forgot about that part. Even from the people who don't quite understand it, that we haven't really had much in the way of a negative response. There's been questions, but no one really makes fuss. It's quite a lot of, well, you do you kind of attitude, which is quite nice, really. Because, we do, you build it up to be this huge thing, and it shouldn't be, really, because all you're saying is, actually, these are the people I love. And some of them in different ways to others, but, they're all my people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of putting it. And I think you're right. Like, when I've told people, like monogamous people, and they don't understand it, but mostly they're like, okay, well, if it works for you, I guess. Like, no one really seems to care. Like, I have had people ask questions, but they're generally actually surprisingly respectful questions. And it's more things, they don't ask personal details as such, but just like kind of how things work. And I haven't actually been put in an uncomfortable position with it, which is kind of ironic because I'm vegan. I have had way more intrusive questions from people, and I've been vegan for I think 7 or 8 years, and I have way more intrusive questions from people, even up to like very recently, about veganism, and I still get that. And I actually get way less questions about being polyamorous, and the questions I do get asked are way more respectful. And so that's a very strange thing.
Yeah, especially because veganism is much more mainstream now.
Yeah.
So it's almost not being a thing at all, almost in some ways.
Yeah, you think that, but then apparently not, because it's very strange, and I still don't really understand it. But I think I don't know. I think maybe because veganism is more known about, it's easy for people to question because they kind of have an understanding of it. Whereas with like polyamory, they don't understand it, so they can't even comprehend it enough to think of any questions to ask. So it's easier to just be like, oh, okay, and then kind of ignore it because they don't. It's like telling someone that 2 + 2 = 5. They're like, okay, if you believe that, that's great, but their brain is never going to be able to come to that answer.
Yes, generally, we find we get one of two responses: either "Don't you get jealous?" or I could never. I'm too possessive. Like
I could never.
I'm
I mean, that's kind of a running joke amongst like I'd say the vegan community. I don't think there actually is a vegan community. If there is, I'm not part of it. I do know other vegan people. I have other vegan friends, but that is like a joke. That is the first thing that people will say to you when they find out you're vegan. Oh, I couldn't do that. Like, yeah, I don't care. I didn't ask. I wasn't talking about
yes.
you. We were talking about
I
me.
do always think when people say, "Oh, I could never," and I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't asking you out. I was just telling you."
And that's one
You
of the
don't have
things. So
to.
like, I'm not. I have one or two people at work that I've talked to about being poly, and I haven't been completely open about it. And the main reason being, and this may be completely in my own head, but the main reason being is that there are a lot. So I'm heterosexual male. There are a lot of heterosexual females at my work, and that I get on with, and I will happily chat to, and we'll cross paths in the kitchen, and we'll chat, and we'll say that because to me they're just people. I'm not thinking about them as any sort of sexual object or anything. But I have a worry that if they found out, they would start to assume that the only reason I talk to them is because I fancy them or because I'm after something. Well, like I'm not at all. And I don't know if that would actually happen or if that is entirely in my head, but I just have this worry that I'd suddenly start getting shunned by people because they think, oh, the only reason he's nice to me is because he's going to try and pull me into his weird open relationship or because he fancies me or something. Like, no, I'm just quite a nice person. I talk to people.
Yes, and like as a woman, I can see both sides of that because like there's always the stereotypical creepy single guy, who only talks to you because he has an ulterior motive, and it's a weird situation where logically you recognise not everyone is like that.
Yeah.
But that little bit in the back of your brain that's had the unwelcome advances goes, but what if he is? So I can absolutely see why that'd be something that you'd like worry about. Because if they view you as married, you're kind of safe almost, which is like a ridiculous concept, really, when you consider how many people have affairs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is the thing I think. Do they think that like like you say, I'm a safe person to talk to because I'm married? Clearly I'm not looking at them in that way. Clearly I'm not trying to chat them up because I'm married. Oh, but actually he is married, but he has this other thing where he can see other people. Oh, does that mean that he's chatting me up? I'm like, and when I say that, I specified that there are heterosexual women at my work because they're the ones that would think I was coming on to them. But just to make perfectly clear, I talk to everyone. I talk to heterosexual men and I talk to homosexual men at work as well. Like all the shit, they're just people, and we're near each other. We're in the same room, so we say hello when we cross paths when we're making a cup of tea or something. Obviously, the straight men wouldn't be bothered by learning this information, but the heterosexual women are the ones who are going to say, oh, hang on, am I a target for him?
Yes. And
they're not.
It's
they're definitely not.
From the other side, actually, it's funny sometimes when guys have realised that I'm poly, especially people that I knew when I was younger, it suddenly turns into this kind of, oh, so you can sleep with whoever you want. And it's like, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean you. It's the freedom to pursue any connection I want, not I'm going to jump the bones of anyone who looks at me.
Yeah, and I think that's a sorry, go on, continue.
Oh, I was just saying, and like that's it's strange in some ways that that's automatically where people's head goes when I say I have multiple relationships. That it's kind of almost downgraded sometimes to just being that I want to sleep around.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's the thing as well because they don't realize it's very superficial and they just think of it as sex is the only thing. And I'm like, oh, what, do you have sex with multiple people? And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, but that's not what I was talking about. I was telling you that I have relationships with multiple people. Like the sex isn't the first thing I think about with those situations.
Yes, it's much deeper than that.
But like an extension of that, I think, like we've been to places, and I know you've been to some of the same places that I've been to, clubs and venues where I think you do get a particular type of, it's possible women, I can't say I've witnessed it, but I've definitely witnessed it with men that seem to think, well, you're here, you're in this place, you're clearly open and you have an open relationship, or you're non-monogamous, or you're polyamorous, so therefore, of course, you're going to want to have sex with me. Like, that's not how it fucking works.
Yes, all the rules of attraction and engagement don't go out of the window just because you're open to the possibility. I think in some ways, I would say I am not pickier, but more aware of who I'm talking to than I would have been when I was single. And I think part of that comes from age. I'm in some ways much wiser than I was when I was younger. But, I have 2 very fulfilling relationships. Why would I add anything that isn't equally as fulfilling to that? And, what fulfilling looks like is going to vary from relationship to relationship. But, I don't need to hope that something is going to improve or someone is going to be a better person than they've shown me they are, because it's being non-monogamous has really given me the confidence to recognize that actually I am worthy of my standards as well.
Yep.
That I can be as choosy as I want. I can say, actually, this facet of your personality or your ethics, your values doesn't actually meet mine, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that we don't connect in that way.
Yeah,
and to be able to just say that.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that again, that I think with polyamory and learning about communication, part of that comes from being able to voice exactly not only what you can offer, but what you want, and as on top of that, what you don't want. So it becomes easier if someone offers you something, I don't know, you don't feel like you need to go along with it. You can say, actually, no, this isn't for me, and you expect the other person to say, yeah. If you say that, if you're single and there's a single man approaching you, say, no, I'm not interested, they're probably not going to take it very well. Whereas if you're polyamorous and it's a polyamorous person, say man or woman, it doesn't really matter, and they approach you and you say, sorry, I'm just not looking for it, odds are they're going to be like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. And it can often lead to things down the road as well, like being able to because you get better at setting your own boundaries. You get so much better at accepting and recognizing that someone else's boundaries are about them, not about you.
Yeah.
And,
definitely.
a no isn't always a personal thing that's about you. Sometimes it's about the other person, and, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And these are all things that I think, again, like I said earlier, that everyone could do with learning some of this stuff. Like, it'd be great to have some sort of polyamory 101 course, which could just be taught to everyone, every person on the planet, just to learn some of these kind of core fundamental things. Because I think I honestly think it would make better people in general. People would be able to communicate better in all situations, and would just make better people, and would create much more comfortable interactions with everyone you meet if everyone had these same core understandings of these things.
And I think especially because it comes with such a strong underpinning of consent that I think in some ways is kind of, it's a little bit lacking with the rules that we tend to follow when we live monogamously. Yeah. The kind of, like, often I see it on forums and things, people will be like, oh, my husband wants to go out for a drink with his co-worker, but she's female.
Yeah.
And I've always been like, okay, so they're going for a drink.
Yeah.
You agreeing to that or not, is really weirdly possessive. No, you can't go for a drink. Well, actually, they're a grown adult, so they can.
Yeah.
But this kind of, this idea of owning people and being able to, I've never quite got my head around the idea that, like, it's fine, I won't let him go out for a drink with a woman, or I won't let her do this hobby with this guy because then they won't cheat on me.
Yeah.
If someone's going to cheat on you, they're going to cheat on you.
And being that controlling, actually you're just pushing them more further away from yourself and more into the arms of someone else. They're more likely to cheat if you're going to try stopping them from doing the things they want to do.
Yes. And trusting that they understand your boundaries and your boundaries as a relationship, and they're not going to do anything that kind of you together haven't consented to as much as that they don't consent to. I find that very a hard thing to get my head around sometimes, and like I kind of always have. I've found that possessiveness weird, which I suppose fits with the fact that I've ended up polyamorous. But yeah, that kind of lack of possessiveness is definitely something that would improve the world in general.
I completely agree with you. And actually, that's a really good point to bring me on to a question that I want to ask you. I have a few questions, so I'm going to start with this one, which is, what have been some of the most rewarding aspects of practicing non-monogamy for you? And I feel like we've kind of crossed some of these things to an extent already, but, just top one or two things off the top of your head.
So obviously the improved communication, absolutely. Learning different ways to communicate and communicate better. But I would also say meeting so many new people who really enrich my life and allowing them to enrich my life without wondering constantly, is there an ulterior motive? Is this more than I think it is? Is this just a friend? Is this just a passing kind of more formal relationship? Are you looking for something different? None of that matters because they'll tell me. Yep. And meeting like more poly people who have those values mean I've learned so many amazing things from people that I wouldn't have expected, because I've been able to just be, almost like just you can just be where you are and be met there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think the that is a big deal for me as well, is the kind of, I think of it as freedom, but I think that's for lack of a better word, to let any, I don't even want to say any relationship, but any interaction, any connection with someone can just be whatever it wants to be, or like it can just evolve organically into whatever it is. There doesn't have to be any pressure. It's not like I'm looking for a girlfriend, I'm looking for a boyfriend, I'm looking for a husband, I'm looking for someone to, have children with. It's just that if anyone I meet, it can be anything. We could just be friends. Fucking brilliant. I love friends. I love having friends. Like if we meet someone and we don't connect in a sexual or romantic way, but we end up being friends, fucking great. I'm happy with that. And if that ends up developing into more, awesome. If it starts off with a, say, more sexual romantic angle, but actually it doesn't work out that way either, well, that's fine. It doesn't, because there's no pressure on it. And we just weren't compatible. We thought this was working and it wasn't. But also following from that, like things ebb and flow as well. Like you may be compatible with someone at a certain point in your life, but then people change over time, and that's also okay. You don't need to stick with something just because it worked previously. If it doesn't work anymore, for whatever reason, and maybe you do lose a level of attraction to each other, for instance, or you're just not interested in that aspect of a relationship with this person anymore, that's completely fine. But also, to add to that is, I think a thing, especially with polyamory, is understanding like the de-escalation of relationships as well. So just because actually you don't feel sexually compatible or you don't feel romantic feelings towards this person anymore, doesn't mean you can't still be friends. It doesn't mean you have to drop a bomb on the relationship and then, lock each other and never speak to each other again.
Yeah. And like, as someone with a chronic illness, not feeling like I have to be the be all and end all for everyone has been like quite freeing, like, because the relationships can be what they be. I can meet someone as a friend and say, I can be a bit useless at texting back because sometimes I read it and then forget about it. Sometimes I sleep for 4 days straight and then you'll hear from me again. But because I'm not expected to be that person's one and only sole friendship, it feels like less of a problem. Yeah. And to some extent with our romantic relationships, whilst I hesitate to use the term pick up each other's slack, we kind of do because we're different people. So Darren and Em both have a much higher sex drive than I do. Yeah. Right? They can do that together, and I can get my sexual needs met when I need to, but I don't have to feel not guilty, but you're always kind of aware of the disparity. And if it was still just me and Darren, I would still be aware of that disparity. And, you know, it's nice to not have to feel, not guilty, guilty is the wrong word, but kind of almost feel bad that my situation means that he's not necessarily getting his needs fulfilled in a way that he would like.
Yeah.
Because he can get that met elsewhere. It's the same with kind of late night conversations. He tends to fall asleep, and once he's asleep, that's it, he's gone. Quite often, I'm awake at silly times in the morning. I have friends and play partners who are also awake at the silly time in the morning, so we chat. And, you know, that fulfills that need for me.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. That's the thing and I think it does come down to what you said, like not having to be someone's everything. Which in monogamous relationships, you're expected to be that person's, let's say, to split the bills with, to come home to spend time watching TV with, to cook dinner, to eat dinner together with, to, you know, to get married, to do all these things, and you have to do all of it with this person just because you're in a romantic relationship. You have to do everything to this person, and yeah, you're completely right that it gives you that kind of almost a freedom that you don't have to be everything. If one of these things you can't be for this person, or you just don't want to be because it's not you, you don't have to be. It's fine.
Yeah, even down to things like a gig. A gig would probably be one of Darren's worst nightmares at the moment. It would be so loud and lots of people, and he would go with me if I needed him to, but I can take Em instead, who will probably enjoy it quite a lot more, and he doesn't have to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I can't ever see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, that's one sort of analogy that I've used before, which is like, say, watching films or particular genres of films at the cinema. For instance, I really like horror films. Horror is my thing. If one of my partners is really into romantic comedies, well, in a traditional monogamous relationship, I'd be going to watch romantic comedies that I didn't want to watch with them. They'd be going to watch horror films that they didn't want to watch with me. But it means that we don't have to do those things together. I can go watch a horror film with someone else. They can go watch a rom-com with someone else. And that's fine. It means that we're not having to pigeonhole ourselves into being this thing this other person wants us to be, which isn't actually us, because they can still find that elsewhere.
And even down to the tiny things, like I quite like holding hands when I'm walking next to someone. But I am very short. I'm less than 5 foot tall. Darren is about 6 foot tall. Us holding hands walking does not work. Like one of us has to get a really weird shaped arm. Em is shorter. I can hold hands and walk with her. So like just little things like that. Whilst it wasn't to my detriment that I can't hold hands and walk with Darren, it's nice to be able to have that still. And no one feels bad about it.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's needs are getting met, but they're not getting met by just one person. But they are still being met, so everyone's happy.
It's a very freeing thing to experience. Like the first time that you realise that, oh, actually, I don't really want to do this thing that you're asking me to do, but I know that your other partner does, so I'll see you when you get back then. Bye.
Exactly. Perfect. So the next question I want to ask you is, so you said like 5 years ago you started off with non-monogamy, and then that evolved into polyamory, and now you have your current relationships. So I would just wonder if you could go back in time to when you were first starting exploring non-monogamy, is there anything you would do differently based on the knowledge you have now? Or do you feel like, no, everything went the way it did and it evolved in such a way that actually, no, I wouldn't change anything?
I think the main difference is I know better now what we should have talked about in the beginning to avoid some of the kind of bumps and snags that we hit.
Yeah.
None of them were necessarily a bad thing. We had a few instances of miscommunication and some kind of hurt feelings and little things like that. But looking back with the information and the knowledge I have now, they could have been avoided if we'd have been asking each other the right questions.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily have changed it. I would have probably gone into it with a bit more information.
Yeah.
But such a minefield. Everyone tells you about the things that you should be doing, and if we'd have followed the rules, we'd never be in the relationships that I say rules, the rules that people like to tell you should follow. We'd have never ended up in the relationship we're in now. You know, especially kind of as a triad, you get lots of, you shouldn't ever try and add a person to a couple. You should all date separately and eventually bring it together. And that kind of wasn't how we started out. We started out as a group and then added in kind of seeing each other separately and went from there. So if I looked at all these rules and followed that, we'd have had to just stop.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have the amazing relationships that I have now.
Yeah, and it's, you say about those rules, and that's, I say let's use rules and air quotes. I don't think they're rules, but I know what you mean by how the general ways people say you should do things. And a big reason for this podcast existing and being the way that it is I think anyone new to exploring non-monogamy, if you go online and you start reading things, there do seem to be this particular set of rules that people will say is like the do's and don'ts of non-monogamy. You should do this, you shouldn't do this. These things are good, these things are bad. And I think, how can you quantify those things? Like, everyone's different, everyone has different experiences, everyone wants to do different things. That's like saying like, oh, you should eat apples, but you shouldn't eat bananas. Like, well, some people like bananas, and some people like both. Some people don't like apples. Like, it doesn't matter. Everyone's different. There can't be one particular set of rules for everyone, and everyone should actually just do the things that work for them. I do think it's good to try and learn about different ways of doing things, try and read things, try and talk to people to find out the different ways of doing things. But at the end of the day, everyone's got to pick and choose which parts of that work for them. And the main point of this podcast is to get different people speaking about their own experiences, so people can listen and be like, oh, okay, well, this person does it like this, but this person does it like this. They're in complete contradiction to each other, but they both work in their own way. Okay, I don't have to subscribe to either one of these things. I could do this way or that way, and it doesn't matter. So actually, you saying that about the whole thing of like, one of those general rules is about like unicorn hunting. You don't add a third person to a relationship, it doesn't work or whatever. Well, you're living proof that it does work, or it can work if it's done in a certain way and it's for the right people.
Yeah, and like something that I did a lot around kind of reading about kind of more the ethical side and kind of almost deconstructing our couple relationship and creating our new relationship is reading through forums and looking at some of the problems that people have had and considering really honestly whether it was a problem that we could have and what we would do if we did.
Yeah.
I have a volunteer role as a counsellor, which is very much about presenting information and letting people pick and choose from it. One of the expressions we use is take what you need and leave the rest. So yeah, that kind of picking and choosing the bits that work for you. But the other side as well for me was very much looking at what hadn't worked and assessing why I felt it hadn't worked and what I could do to avoid that in some ways. So in the very early days, I'd say to Darren or Em, like, what if this? What if that? So we could start with conversations that might be uncomfortable. As a triad especially, kind of saying to them, like, what if me and Em split up? Like, what happens then?
Yeah.
And for me saying, like, making it really clear, I wouldn't expect those two to split up. That it might be uncomfortable and awkward and sad for a little while, but I wouldn't expect those two to split up, and have them think about that as well. Was really useful because whilst yes, I don't want to think about us splitting up. That would be really sad because I really like both of them. But the reality is, things happen.
And I think contingency plans are always a good idea. Like, it's always worth, like, I don't think it's good to say like, oh, let's never think about this because it's a sad thought. Like, sometimes no, it's good to actually have a bit of an idea of what would happen if these bad things happen. What would you do if the house burnt down? Well, I don't know. I don't want to think about my house ever burning down. No one wants to. But what would you do if it did? Because it's probably good to have an idea of how you would handle it and what you would do.
Yes. Absolutely. Weirdly, having had my house flooded by a burst water main, and had that kind of have to move out in a panic with nothing. Yeah, there's lots of things that you don't think about. Like, we stored all our paperwork underneath the stairs, which is great until the insurance company are like, "Have you got receipts?" Yeah, but they were under 3 foot of water. So
yeah, exactly.
and all those little things that you don't think about until afterwards. Sometimes thinking about that worst case scenario can avoid the worst case scenario entirely because you've already considered it.
Yeah, so now you won't put the important paperwork under the stairs because you know what can happen.
Exactly.
The same way you know to put certain things in place to prevent negative situations from arising. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially like with the kids, like one of the things that I've always really appreciated with our relationship with Em is she's never tried to parent them. She's very much like almost like a fun aunt. They know they can go to her with anything, and she'll always help them. She'll always be there for them. But she's never tried to insert herself like that.
Yeah.
But we also discussed what happens if we're together for a long time and then split up, because that's going to affect the kids as well. Like, what happens there? And making sure that we were all happy with any outcome before we kind of introduced them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a thing, and I think that's quite kind of a common thing when kids are involved anyway. Like with even monogamous couples who, if someone's single with a kid and then they bring a new partner into the mix, and that person eventually, they have to integrate that partner with the kid. Does that partner end up becoming a step parent? And then what happens if that relationship ends? I when I was a kid, I remember having friends that had step parents, and then as time went on, that step parent wasn't around anymore. And so they went from their parents splitting up to then having this new person introduced. They got used to that person as a step parent, and now that person's gone again. And I don't think people necessarily, or at least back then, didn't necessarily think about how that would affect kids. Where I think it is a little bit more different now. People do think more in general about how those sort of things would affect the kids as well as themselves.
Yeah. And kind of having that confidence that we could introduce her to the kids with the knowledge that if this does go wrong, she said, if the kids still want a relationship with me, that's fine. I'll carry on however that looks. It doesn't necessarily matter what's happening with us. Her relationship with the kids is almost separate, but it can function.
It is
independently
entwined in a way. It's similar to like a polyamorous relationship in general, that she has a relationship with you and she has a relationship with the kids, and as much as they may be intertwined, it still is its own thing. It's not like the kids are part of your relationship with her. They're not. They're separate. But then she also has that relationship with the kids as well. And
it's a really with both her and with my meta, the kids get on with them so well, and it's really lovely for them to have that.
Yeah, I can imagine that makes a really big difference. So the next question I've got for you is, this was kind of leading on from what we were talking about a little while ago, is are there any particular myths about non-monogamy that you think are important to debunk? And I say this in terms of, like I say, when you read things online, like when people say, "Oh, never add a third to an existing relationship," like are there anything like that you think, right out, no, that's wrong, I don't think that's good, I think people need to stop saying that?
Yeah, so obviously the adding the third, that can absolutely be done ethically and well.
Yep.
I would say I've sometimes seen it referred to as poly on hard mode, which I can agree, because people look at us and they say, "Oh, you're a triad," but what they miss is it's actually 4 relationships.
This is one thing that I always say.
Her and him, and then all of us together. So actually, it's not just one new relationship.
I've given that kind of, I say, advice when I've seen people online, looking like, you get couples that are like, "Oh, we're looking to add a third." I'm like, okay, but do you know what adding a third actually means? It doesn't mean that you and your existing partner get this toy to just play with when you want to, because this third person is also a person. and you and your partner are not one person, you are two. So it's not a relationship of one-on-one. You both individually, you already have your relationship. Both of you individually will have a relationship with a third person, and then there's a fourth relationship, which is all the three of you together. And a lot of people seem to stop at that point and go, oh, hang on. We didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. And actually finding a person that like you both find attractive and meets both of your your ethics, your morals, someone that you genuinely get on with, really isn't that simple. I mean, you think
they're called unicorns for a reason.
Yes, I mean we struck gold with them. Bless her, she's so lovely. I'm so glad we met her. But like, even if you think how many kind of couples have a friend that one doesn't like, how few couples have genuine friends that they both get on with equally, and then try and add like sex and feelings and emotions at a deeper level into that. It's really not that simple, but it can be done. I think the other one I'd add is this: it is not always led by men. Sometimes, especially because Darren has 3 female partners, we kind of get like, oh, was it his idea? He just wants to sleep around. And actually, it was me who floated the first idea of kind of looking at ENM. And it was me who then broached the subject of saying, actually, I think this is more serious, maybe, and that we should look at like firming this up into a formal relationship rather than it kind of still viewing it as something casual. And from talking to other people, that's really not that uncommon.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and I think that's one of those things that this brings us sort of almost full circle back to the start, where people talk about when people first start exploring non-monogamy, they talk about this thing of putting the rule in place of no catching feeling. And I think it's fucking. I personally think it's fucking ridiculous, because, I don't understand what feelings actually means. Because like, it's one thing to fall in love with someone, but like, I have feelings for all of my friends, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be friends with them. Like, I have some sort of connection with them, and I think it's very difficult to have, an ongoing sexual relationship with someone without having any feelings for them at all. And the idea of catching feelings just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go down to the basic, well, lust is a feeling. So if you're going to have a one-off sexual encounter, can you not feel the lust? How's that going to work?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like much fun to me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the last couple of questions I've got for you. Next one is, so if someone I don't know, friend, family member or anything, came to you one day and said, I'm thinking about exploring non-monogamy, is there any advice you can give me? What's the first thing you would say to them?
Oh, talk some more. To people who are already non-monogamous, to any existing partners, to a therapist, even better if you can, because there is nothing quite so good as picking out your insecurities or worries as opening a relationship, because you're human. And especially when your partner finds someone else and seeing that kind of new relationship energy, which even I think for people who are experienced in non-monogamy and kind of actively work to stop that energy affecting their partners, it still does. You meet someone new, you get giddy, you get silly, you want to talk about them a lot.
Yeah.
That's a human response. You don't know how you're going to react to that until you experience it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have people you can talk to, it's not going to be fun.
Yeah,
so
I completely agree.
Just surround yourself by people who, not necessarily just people who have experienced it, but people that can actually listen as well. People who can just get things off your chest and just be like, this is what I'm feeling here. Let me like kind of throw it all at you as a sounding board. And you might not be able to fix it, but hey, at least I can get it off my chest.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a big deal, having people that you can actually talk to. And I think one thing, and it can be quite difficult, but like a therapist is a very good idea, but it can be quite difficult trying to talk to monogamous friends about non-monogamous subjects, because a lot of the time they don't understand it, and what they're actually going to probably do is talk you out of the whole thing, because they don't understand it. So they could, their idea is this isn't something people should be doing, so they're going to say to you, well, why are you doing this thing? You shouldn't be doing it. And that's not what you need. You need positive reinforcement. You don't need the negativity. So yeah, if you can, therapist is a good idea, but the best thing is to actually try and talk to other non-monogamous people.
Yes. And it's not for everyone, and there's no shame of trying it and coming to the realization that it's not for you. But I think if you don't go into it positively, you're not going to give yourself the best shot at it. So you're kind of deciding on half the information.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I have one last question for you. And this is quick answer, right off the top of your head. In a couple of words, how would you sum up non-monogamy for yourself?
Off the top of my head, freedom. Just freedom. I feel very free and very cherished.
That's good. That's a really good answer. I can't dispute that. I think it's freedom is great. Freedom is great.
And it's funny because now I look at it also, like the fact that I do feel very cherished and very loved doesn't come from the fact that I necessarily have more partners. It's more of because coming from a long-term relationship and opening it up, whilst I've always felt if someone's going to cheat, someone's going to cheat. But
yeah,
he has the freedom, as do I, to choose whoever and however many partners we want. And we still choose each other.
You. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes it's a conscious thing. Sometimes we have to actively choose each other because life. And sometimes it's just that, you wake up in the morning and sometimes he's here, sometimes he's staying with another partner and it's just a text. Sometimes it's a phone call in the middle of the day, but he's choosing me.
Yeah.
And the same with Em. She could have had anyone she wanted and she chose us. And that's really special.
I think that is a perfect way to end this episode of this podcast. So I'm going to say thank you, Kerrie, for sharing your experiences.
No, thank you for having me. It's been quite fun, actually.
Definitely. It was great talking to you. So to everyone listening, please remember, if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then please send an email to spillingtheteapodcast@outlook.com and follow us on social media for all podcast updates. I will see you next time when I spill more tea on non-monogamy.